Hey, that turned out pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. So we'll wait around and see how many people show up.
My husband
I'm,
said he might pop in the chat.
yeah, he's in there. So yeah, so people are. I've been accused of being like a dime store novelist for YouTube. So that's one of those things, and I'm going to be going in and out of camera because YouTube does not like my nicotine habit. Um, but
I mean,
I
you could,
mean,
if you want to be seen with your nicotine habit, you could always join Ord's board.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I don't think that's nicotine he's smoking. But anyway,
I have no idea what he smokes.
yeah, um, yeah, it is a little bit strange sometimes. But thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you. So as we get going, we'll reiterate this throughout. What we do with this, I've only done one of these, and it was a really good exercise before. And what we did was we created a character name. We tried to figure out a situation we wanted that character to be in. And then we kind of guidelined it out and wrote a little simple story. Now it's going to be herky jerky, and some details are going to be in there by the end of the stream that aren't in there with a final product. But what I'll do is I'll take what we do tonight and I'll write a story and I'll voice it and I'll do everything and get it back up on the channel in a week.
Cool.
So
I am honored to be a part of this, sir.
Yes, and I do appreciate that because especially last time we wrote a female-centric story and had no really females helping write it. So we think we got it okay. People seem to like it, the final product.
I mean, depending on the kind of female you're going for, because I am not your average female.
Well,
at least mentally speaking.
That's typically the case with people that I know. That it isn't so much that we're different; we just come to the same conclusion from different perspectives.
Fair.
So even not in the general population female would still be able to give us a better female perspective than we would have normally.
Well, I can definitely give you the goth perspective if you need it.
Well, yeah, that's the other. Oh man, I grew up with the clove smokers, so.
Oh yeah, you're from the '80s, so you're familiar with the trad goths.
Yeah, I remember their emergence. I played a few games of Vampire myself. So.
Trad is really just short for traditional, meaning when it started off as a music genre.
Yeah.
Like Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, Joy Division.
Joan Jett.
Which I admit I actually have not listened to because I am not part of the music faction. I am the aesthetic and belief faction.
Well, I'm one of those, as we wait for people to get in here, I'm one of those people that I grew up in the country listening to Barbara Mandrell and George Jones and things like that, and heavy metal at the same time.
Oh, I love metal.
And so anything with a good tune, I love classical music as well. And then I also went off to college and I'm a tech, but I also live on a lake in the country in the middle of nowhere. So I come from both perspectives, the kind of pseudo-liberal English major, which is what I was, and growing up down-to-earth, blue-collar farmer type. So I see both the perspectives, and things still look insane to me. So especially with the way they do not have to destroy these things to make a point.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the tragedy to all this. So I try to come to these stories that way. So since I think we kind of killed time long enough. I tend to keep talking and talking and talking. We've got about 5 or 6 people watching now. Why don't we go ahead and see if we can come up with a character name? It can be
No, the
male.
names are always the hardest.
It can be male, female, whatever we want to do.
I
So-
always take the names are the hardest to come up with every single time. I could spend days trying to figure
Well,
those ones
Let's
out.
do this first then. Let's let the situation guide us. How about that? Because we can't plot anything unless we do the situation.
Okay,
So-
fair. So what kind of situation are you going for? Or can it just be anything random?
Yeah. We were just discussing that female perspective sci-fi as well. Because, I do have a definite sentimental side. I mean, I just cried in Maverick, but that's more nostalgia than anything. And even though I don't like what they're doing with Obi-Wan, my son made me watch it with him. And I thought it was done well, what they did. I just didn't like them changing the original story.
Yeah. They definitely could have written it better. That's for sure.
Yes. Well, it's a TV budget. They're putting all these things on a TV budget.
More like it's a Lucasfilm Disney budget because they're losing money.
Yeah. Well, everything Disney's losing money.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, who kind of sort of liked Ghostbusters 2016, saw the Thor trailer today and thought it was weird.
That was a really weird trailer. I hate MCU Thor.
Yeah, he used to be good in the beginning.
Yeah, when he was more accurate to actual mythology, but they've now officially destroyed Gore the God Butcher, which is my favorite Marvel Thor story arc.
Yeah.
I actually liked Gore's story, and now they have destroyed it officially.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only streaming services we have at this point are the ones that my wife pays for, my son pays for. I don't even watch anything.
My husband and I only pay for the anime ones. Our parents pay for everything else.
My anime, or my really the only thing, the last straw was Wheel of Time. It really was. And of course I have Prime just because I have it for shipping. Because you can't get by nowadays without it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's see. I'm okay making up names. It depends on the situation, really. So
yeah, I find it depends on the kind of genre you're going for too.
Yeah. So we need to figure out: do we want to do a horror? We want to do a fantasy, a dark fantasy, cyberpunk, steampunk,
a horror fantasy.
We could do a horror fantasy.
I mean, literally everything I write has an element of horror to it.
So on my last story stream, the prologue is technically horror fantasy. It's set up like the person who shows up on the doorstep of the vampire's home.
That's interesting. Instead of the vampire showing up on the other person's doorstep.
Right. Like it's the old 40s and 50s trope about the people showing up at the monster's house. Sort of like Rocky Horror Picture Show. So that is I loved writing that, and that was the story that became the prologue to my novel, my fantasy novel, but was also the basis of the story creation. It's based on She Walks in Beauty Like the Night.
Ooh.
So
that's a nice line.
Oh, hey, Ink Bandit, that's Jennifer. She knows me in real life.
Hello, person.
So let's do that. Let's do a horror fantasy.
I'm good with that.
I
like horror and I like fantasy.
So let's at least narrow down what our character is, as in race or
species,
or gender. So what would the chat like to see? I mean, we do have a female here, so
I just find names are hardest, so I want other people to decide. Hey, honey, if you're listening, help us figure this out. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell.
All right, so we'll do a female, and so let's do something like a dark elf.
Ooh, are we going for the charcoal skin, white hair type dark elf?
Yeah, that's
Those are
good
all.
story.
Yeah,
I read a lot of Salvatore at a formative age, so starting with Homeland. So yeah, let's do dark elf female.
Nice.
And we can do. How about? I don't know.
Obsidian. All right, that's actually something I think I'm going. Wait, the dark elf character that I'm going to be writing in one of my stories, I'm either naming Asphodel or Obsidian. I do not remember which, but I'm pretty sure it was going with Asphodel. So yeah, let's go with Obsidian.
Obsidian.
Because it's dark. If you need to come up with dark names, that's something I can do.
How about that?
Alcora. Nice. Okay, works for me.
All right, so now we need a situation. So when I say situation, so we're going to drop them in the middle of something, right? So there has to be some form of either danger or some form of struggle that we've got to put them into.
Yeah.
So we can take this from real life and adapt it to the genre, or we can just come up with something that we've maybe heard before. Anything like that.
Let's see. Generally, dark elves are persecuted for just being dark elves, like elves are persecuted for just being elves. But it's different with dark elves because they are less known than regular elves. And
right, elves. And in the generation I came from, it was a clearly a metaphor for racism, because that's what the Dristo Erden story was. It was a metaphor for, hey, not all of us are that way. You're generalizing.
Yeah.
So
I don't understand why they're all in fantasy. There always has to be a hatred for elves.
Yeah. Well,
never understood that.
It shows the short-sightedness. It was originally intended to show the short-sightedness of humans, and Tolkien did it to show the greed of the humans want to live forever. Because the elves did, and they couldn't. So that was what set them apart.
Yeah.
And that's I had a whole semester class on this in college. So that, and I had another semester on Beowulf, which was much more tedious.
I love Beowulf.
Yeah, but there's only so much you can glean from it.
I know, but when we were talking in high school, one of the first stories that we did that year was Beowulf. And I was the only one who enjoyed those scenes with Grendel because of all the gore. And there was one day when I wasn't at school and they were like, hey, where's Raven? She's not here. There's no one to talk about the bloodshed. Because they were wondering why it was so quiet. Secondary character, Grudge? I see.
That way, Olympus Light will get his fair representation. How's
Grudge. That's actually not a bad name for a dwarf. It sounds
dwarfish, doesn't it?
It sounds dwarfish, yeah. Grudge.
Now, what's really going to get him, maybe we have her wake up in a dungeon and she has to rescue the dwarf.
Huh, that's not a bad idea. Does she remember why she's in a dungeon?
Yeah, that would be an interesting twist, her not knowing how she got there.
Sometimes that can happen. I'm also imagining like lacrima crystals in the shackles to suppress her elven power.
Right.
Because that's always something you got to make sure of. A lot of times, people who imprison magical species often forget to suppress their powers to make it harder for them to escape. That's just something I've noticed. So it's something I like to take care of in my writing. Anytime someone is in shackles, you put something on it to suppress their powers.
There we go. All right, so I'm going to highlight this stuff here. And well, that was freaky. I was tracking my mouse on the video instead of on my screen. So there we go. Now let's do plots. All right, so she's in the situation where she has to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Whether she remembers or not, it's out. And then, all right, so the way I do it typically is, so we know we got to have Grudge Soul Forge show up.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need now is an antagonist.
I'm thinking either a warlock or a dragon.
Now, here's where we can clearly see a difference between writing the story and reading the story.
Yeah.
Because we have to know what the stakes are for the characters far before the reader can possibly know.
Mm-hmm.
We have to know what they're up against and how it can be possible for them to overcome that antagonistic feature. As a reader, you're not going to know that till halfway through the book. In a good book, you may not even know that till the end.
Unless you're really observant, like my husband, who can tell within the first few chapters.
Yeah, it got
in most books that he reads.
My spouse won't watch science fiction or fantasy with me at all.
Oh, that sucks.
Well, because I predict everything that happens.
Master does that too when we're watching anime and the intros are and the intro music is playing. He literally predicts who the villain is just by the scenes they put in the song.
Yes, and and that's how I write. So typically, when I'm writing, I'm listening to some genre of music that puts me in the mood that I need the scene to be in.
Same.
So if I'm doing fighting,
it's Viking music for me.
If I'm doing fighting, I'll do something like super heavy metal or 80s hair bands. If I'm doing some of the 80s hair bands, I also use for the romantic aspects, if those come into play, things like that. And then I just write. I type about 120 words a minute, so I smoke like a chimney and I write. And I just sit down and do it. I will look up and my wife is like, "You've been writing for 4 hours."
I haven't had one of those kind of zones in a while.
Well, as I get older, they're easy to come by.
I guess that's fair.
Yeah. So
I had them mostly in high school, in the middle of class.
Yeah. So I got lucky and I moved from one state to the other and I had too many credits. So all they could think to do with me was put me in typing class for 3 years. And I learned how to type on an old, big, humongous monster thing that sounded like a air jet taking off, or my gaming laptop when I'm playing Cyberpunk. But
I'm pretty sure my grandmother still has a typewriter somewhere in her house.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with Olympus Golem Light there that Beowulf is one of the greatest poems ever written.
Absolutely.
And honestly, I want to eventually in that vein, because Beowulf is truly best heard and not read. Because it began as an oral tradition.
True.
So I want to resurrect that old aspect, and I want to, after this year's over and I get a little bit more time, I want to do a weekly story man stream where I put on a cloak and I walk up to a fire and I just tell a story, like the old days, like the traveler from village to village.
That sounds awesome. So basically, you want to be a traveling bard.
Yeah, basically. You know, maybe have the big piece of metal to do lightning with and stuff. I don't know, maybe not that far, but
Well,
you know,
a
just
lute or a hurdy-gurdy with you?
right, like just sitting in front of the fire and telling the story like they did back in the days when they had time to do it.
Yeah, bard work was good work back then.
I'm learning to, I've got to finish cleaning the guitars, but I'm about to start learning guitar, and so I can bring that along as well.
I like it.
I never saw myself as a bard. I never even played one.
I don't play really any instruments either. But a couple of instruments that I've always really wanted to learn are violin and harp.
Yeah,
Harp is one of the oldest instruments in the world. Why wouldn't you want to learn it?
Yeah, I tried to play clarinet in high school, but we moved around so much it wasn't feasible. So
the elementary school I went to, in mandatory music class, everyone learned to play the recorder.
Yeah,
it was mandatory, and it sucked.
Yeah. So all right, let's do this. We need an antagonist. So let's think.
My first thought was a warlock or a dragon warlock. Something with dragon. I like dragons.
Maybe we do a warlock who is secretly a dragon. Black dragon.
Dragons can take on a human form depending on how powerful and how old they are. Then again, most magical species get more powerful as they get older.
Did not mean to do that.
Artifacts?
Yep. How about that?
That's not bad.
So things like names come to me, but it's because I'm so very well read. That's why the first rule in writing is to read a lot. You know, I don't go to bed at night unless I have a story going that I'm listening to. Right now I'm listening to a lot of Brent Weeks. But you know, everything from hardcore science fiction to, heck, I like the Halo novels. I listen to everything. I listen to religious stuff too. One of my favorite novels of all time is The Shack. But you have to read things. It's kind of like politics. You have to listen to the other side. You have to read things that you're not comfortable reading. Once a year, I reread or listen to all of the classics. Like I'll listen to the rhetoric stuff from ancient Greece. I'll listen to the Iliad, I'll listen to Shakespeare. I have several copies of the complete works. I have Romeo and Juliet almost memorized.
I have The Raven memorized.
Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe is a good one.
He is one of my inspirations, after all.
So artifacts just came to me because there was a dragon who appeared to be a person in the Dresden Files novels, and his name was a Fax, something Fax. And then his brother, who had died at the hands of somebody in the series of novels, was also called something Fax. And I thought a black dragon would like artifacts, so Artofax.
That is not bad.
And it once you get used to coming up with names, it comes to you like that, but you have to be very well read.
I usually just look up different kinds of, like, I think about the personality or the power of the character, and then I look up online different names with that kind of meaning or that have to do
right.
with
And I'll do that, like now the fantasy novel that is going to eventually end up on Indiegogo, which is what these fantasy part of these streams are about. Like I have the prologue and the first 3 chapters on the first stream that ran last week. This stream is taking place at that right now, but next week it will be the next 4 chapters, so it'll be through 7 or 8, and it'll go until chapter 11 or 12, and then that's part 1. That's the beginnings. That's where I do. Have you ever read or watched The Stand?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure if I have.
Stephen King's The Stand. It was
Most
about.
Stephen King that I have read, because I used to not be allowed to read Stephen King, is The
Yeah.
Dark Tower.
Okay. Well, there's a reason I say this is because it's interesting that you read the Dark Tower series,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I could not put that one down.
which is an amalgam of all his books.
Mm-hmm. I know. He literally inserted himself into that series.
So The Stand was the super flu that destroyed the world.
Oh.
And what the
that
way
world was in the Dark Tower series.
Yes. So
Whoa.
So what he did was he wrote about each character, main character, and then had them come together, and that's what Circles Riven is about. So the idea behind that story was that it was one of our adventures in a world we made up when in the 90s when we were kids. So I took that story, and I really fleshed out the characters, and I had them have believable prophesied guidelines.
Yeah.
So you got the typical barbarian from the north, like Wolfgar in the Drift series. You've got a bard who is also a half elf, and she's despised by both the humans and the elves.
Things usually are.
You have a monk who is a cross between a cleric and a traditional Shindo monk, fighting monk.
Cool.
Who is supposed to be the next prophet. And you have a sorceress who, in a world that there aren't anything called sorceresses, because in this world the magic is 5 circles of magic. And you can only pull magic out of the universe and use it. You have to use spell components and things like that. She is what they call the 7th circle that shouldn't exist. She's a source of magic. And what
clever.
she really is, in the prophecy, she's called the vessel. She is the vessel for the ultimate bad guy, who is the Queen of Darkness, Selene. The story goes that God created the world, the elves to grow things and be part of nature, the dwarves to shape the earth and be from the earth, and the humans, which were supposed to be the emotional morality for all 3 societies. Above them, he set 3 angels to watch over them, and they took the aspect of dragons. The black dragon, or the green dragon, was for the elves. The gray dragon was for the dwarves, and the white dragon was the human dragon. And they had forms of that nature. Anissa was an elf with golden skin. Torin was a dwarf, looked like a wizard dwarf. And Selene was a human female with long black hair.
Wow, that is really fleshed out.
She fell in love, and vice versa, with the king of the humans at the time on Terran. The other 2 dragons found out about it, or watchers as they're called, found out about it and kidnapped him and brought him before her and said, they're humans and they corrupt everything. They will corrupt you. So we're going to remove his memory of you so that you're not corrupted by him. And instead of that happening, he committed suicide and went to hell. So she flew to hell and made a deal with the King of Chaos that she would deliver Terran to him if he resurrected her lover. So his name is Moab, and he's an undead death knight, basically. Well, there was a war, and Terran was basically destroyed. So God intervened. He ripped apart a part of the world and created a moon called Terene, the world above. And he put the elves there, the dwarves there, and the humans there that were not corrupted, and cast out a prophecy. He sealed her inside the moon and said that she would return one day to finish the war. So you have this world below that's already been corrupted in the world above, and then this is the beginning of that prophecy.
Wow, I am impressed.
So yeah, it's a. I've been working on it for 30 years.
I am very impressed, sir.
So yeah, that's the basis of it. You know, it's got an elf king, prince who's supposed to be king, and he's betrothed to a half elf because his father wanted to prove a point to the king, and et cetera, et cetera. So it has all the tension and side tension and relationship stuff that just happens throughout normal everyday life, but it's set in a fantasy setting. And it's got the aspects of the dark fantasy because the vessel doesn't know. She's just a kid. She's a girl. And she falls in love with this barbarian, and then she gets overwhelmed and becomes this queen of darkness that they have to eventually go and save. So, and you get to the end of the 3-novel series and you find out that it was all about love in the first place. He's like, you know, she's held this grudge because they were punished for being in love and hated God because of it. And the creator's like, I had nothing to do with that. It was them. They made that decision on their own because it's about choice. And
Powerful
you can
stuff.
choose not to do what you're going to do, that kind of thing.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah. So I rediscovered it about a year and a half ago, and that's when I started really writing stories, putting them on YouTube, because that's the second rule of writing: write a lot. So even if you don't show it to anybody, you should always write a lot. So we've got a dragon named Artifacts.
What's his? Have we figured out what his goal is yet, or what his desires are?
All right. So Artifacts, he's obviously has something to do with artifacts.
Because one thing I remember about story writing courses in college is the character is that both the antagonist and the protagonist both need to want something.
Yes, they have to have a goal, whether it's metaphysical or physical. So we already know the main character's goal is to get out. Right?
Yes.
And so we can either make her what I like to call a knowledgeable character, or an ignorant character. So either she's older and she suspects, or she knows what she has that somebody else might want, or she's a young innocent character who doesn't know what somebody might want.
I think the knowing character is better, because then because the character already knows what the stakes are, so does the reader. At least in my opinion. I have that with one of my stories, in that my main character is a knowing protagonist, right, because she just has the knowledge of what she has, more or less.
Correct.
So because she knows what an antagonist wants from her, she knows to fight to keep that away from them. So I find that it makes the story a bit more intriguing, is because they're not ignorant. They know what they're fighting for, and that makes the fight that more, what's the word I'm looking for? Meaningful? Powerful? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So he wants an artifact, and she's going to know what it is. So he wants...
Or she is the artifact.
That would be even better. That she's a specific bloodline.
I mean, bloodlines can be useful for a lot of things, because generations.
He is a warlock.
Generations and having multiple descendants, bloodlines can be both diluted, but there can also be chances of them to die out so that only one is left. So if there's only one person left, then it's harder to find them. Especially when a world is so densely populated as Earth.
So I misspoke earlier. Rule number 2 is to read a lot. Rule number 3 is to write a lot. Rule number 1 is to write.
Yeah, that's true.
You've got to sit down and do it. So we don't have everything we need here. We have a main character, a possible secondary character, the antagonist. We have the goals, an artifact. She's an artifact, a bloodline specifically needed for something, but that's all we know. So we don't know exactly what. This is one of these things that can evolve as you write.
Oh, absolutely. I've done that before.
So the whole idea of a pantser is they create the character, they throw them in a situation. A plotter creates a plot line and inserts what characters are needed into it. That's why typically, if you're not really good at plotting and characterization at the same time, you can get a lot of stilted cardboard characters.
True.
Whereas a pantser, you'll get the characters correct, especially if you do it a lot, but sometimes you're going to end up with writer's block. And it happens a lot more to pantsers because they write themselves into corners.
Yeah. I find that also, could be why I have writer's block so often. Maybe I am more of a pantser than a plotter. But I do find that my plots as well as my characters tend to evolve as I write the story.
Yes. I mean, nobody's ever black and white with it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why I try to tend to have a general guideline as where I want it to go, even if it's in my own mind.
Mm-hmm.
I find that if I keep some aspects of this in my own mind, it's more flexible than if I had written it down.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
I'm always writing it in my head.
My brain requires structure to work. So if it's written down, I'm going to follow what I've written down. And sometimes it's even better for me if I just get out a notebook and start writing by hand.
Yeah, I need to start doing that again because that's definitely when I get back best into the zone. Only problem is you have your Saturdays free to do that, and I do not. I have my Jewish Sabbath, and all of my best writing ideas come then when I can't even pick up a pen for religious reasons.
There you go.
It's so annoying.
Well, the other thing is that I don't do a lot of other things on my free time. So, yeah, I'm trying to rework these stories, do at least a story stream a week, and get prepared for Halloween. But I'm going to try and at least get one story out a week. At least try to schedule that, because if I don't, I end up going through spurts of growth, and that's what's hurting me on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mostly have married life and housework to take care of in between writing time.
Yeah, if the fire hadn't happened, I'd be way ahead of where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Riot Kitty. It's good to see you. All right, so I think we got enough to start writing at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tend to do is I tend to write in the beginning where we are and try to get a feel for the scene. And then I go, okay, let's present the situation from our point of view that we're writing from. Okay.
Yeah. The hook line, which is always the first line to introduce a story, is always the most important, because that's how you get your reader's attention. I don't know if you've ever read that book called Uglies, Jack.
The series?
Yeah. If you've ever read the first book, literally the first line is, "The sky was the color of cat vomit."
Yes.
That is how he hooks his teenage readers.
Yes. And my my third wife really enjoyed that series.
I only read the first book, really.
But she was also about...
And I saw the twist coming in the first chapter.
She was also about 12 years younger than me, so...
Yeah. I mean, with my opening line, sometimes I don't end up figuring that out until maybe a chapter or two or halfway through the story, because editing is always, I always go back when I come up with new ideas.
I've always really liked young adult fiction. The Hunger Games series, I loved it.
Hunger Games isn't bad, but the movie sucked.
Well, yeah. I just didn't see how they were going to do it anyway. But anyway, I liked one with the last book. What was the one right after that?
Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay.
But those three, and then there was another series that they only did 2 of.
Oh,
I forget.
Suzanne did make a prequel book called The Snake and the Songbird, or The Songbird and the Snake, which really, no, it was The Songbird and the Snake, which phonetically, she should have gone with The Snake and the Songbird.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't her, but it was in that same young adult genre.
Yeah. I mean, with one of my own stories, I finally figured out
the Divergent series.
Yeah. Divergent. That's a different story. But it's more or less the same plot, honestly.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they killed the point of view character who was in first person in the last book, really, I'm like, that was weird.
Yeah, which was why they ended up making it. She ended up writing a 4th book from the point of view of the other main character. Called 4.
I mean, and that was an interesting story. But I thought if they would have taken Finn in Star Wars and made him a Jedi, it would have been a much better movie.
Oh, I loved his character in the beginning, but also the idea of a stormtrooper defecting from the army. That's also a story that they didn't get to expand on enough.
No.
Not to mention all the other missed opportunities they had with the sequels, but whatever.
It was all studio interference.
Yeah, true.
Because I know Hollywood has good writers. We had the 80s and 90s.
True. And the early 2000s.
Yeah. I believe that a lot of this stuff, the poor writing started in 2007. When the Screenwriters Guild struck, and all these producers and directors started writing their own stuff.
Yeah, and they didn't really know what they were doing, were they?
Nope. I mean, look at how Heroes disintegrated. Look at how
a lot of good series back then just
what was the show that JJ was on about the island, the Lost? It fizzled into nothing at the same time. It was because of that writer's strike.
Yeah. I think The Cape was affected by it too. Master and I were watching that recently.
Yeah.
Because I had heard of it but never seen it. We actually wanted The Cape.
Yeah.
It came out before Arrow and is still so much better.
It was a lot better. But it was only like one season, half a season.
Yeah, it was because it ended up canceled in the middle of those strikes. So we're never going to get to see the ending because it's like 20 years, it's like 10, 20 years later, and the actor who played the 11-year-old son is now an adult. So, oh well.
All right, so this is how
all right, opening lines.
So here we go. The thing with an opening line is you want the reader to experience the scene, the setting,
and be intrigued by it at the same time. I'm thinking something about actually waking up in the dungeon part.
Yes, and you want to express that through as many senses as you can. The sense of touch, the sense of taste, the sense of feel. Where are you? Okay? Because the way I watch a movie, the way I read a novel, the way I listen to a novel or a story, the way I read a comic book, I lose myself in it to the point where I'm watching a movie in my brain. I see the characters the way I see them. That's why when they change these things, like Wheel of Time, it's not just aggravating, and it doesn't just make me angry. It takes me out of it.
Yeah. I've started reading the Witcher series after first watching the show. Yeah. And I am really now seeing how much people really don't like the show because of how much it differs from the books. Like there are storylines in season 2 that have Ciri in them, when in the books she hadn't even been born yet.
Exactly. And there are things that yes, there are things that you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a network of channels, we tend to focus on the woke. But really, it's just bad writing in general.
It is bad writing in general. It always starts with the writing.
Because you can write a woke story that's entertaining.
That's true.
You can't write an entertaining story that's woke.
Oh, absolutely, that's true.
So it's the converse. You can write a story that has woke stuff in it and do it well and entertain people. But if you just insert it in there for whatever kind of virtue signal you think you're making, it's just going to destroy the story, because that's the biggest rule in writing, is to take out what's not the story.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't impact the storyline or the characters in such a way where they would change their views, then it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah. But I think I have come up with a good line.
Okay.
She woke to the sound of scuffling rats.
There you go.
That way we're immediately taken into when she is in the dungeon. There are rats, and she hears them. Then she wakes. Boom, you're welcome. I'm having fun.
I am too.
To the stench of unwashed bodies, mildew, and decay. Because those are what you will smell in a dungeon.
There you go.
What brought her fully to consciousness, maybe?
Fully aware.
No, that's better.
Yeah. And yes, I have Grammarly. Which is only about 25% effective.
I just use the Microsoft Word's spell and grammar checks automatic. That, and I just also just know grammar. So
well, I do too, but grammar is much more comprehensive in Grammarly, and I can usually catch myself. I've got it set up to where it catches when I'm using overly complicated language.
See, I prefer overly complicated language because that's just my writing style. I'm very academic, romantic era prose.
Yeah, but I'm writing for YouTube. And
okay, that's fair. You gotta make it simple.
Well, it's not just that. It's that because I'm reading it myself, I'm not, I don't have actors that can pull that off. I try to use more simple language. It's one of the ways. That's why Star Wars is the way it is. That's why the dialogue is the way it is in Star Wars, is because he wrote it for a simple story and wanted the ideas to come across very easily.
Yeah. I definitely, with the children's book I'm working on, it's a story that I had written years ago, but I'm having to simplify it to the level that children can understand. And for whatever reason, I am finding that extremely difficult. Well, because I have to make it so simple and just simplify all my diction.
I have a lot of respect for folks who do write children's fiction, because it is very, very difficult.
It is so hard.
And it's so important too, because that's what gets critical thinking underway. Is being able to interpret what the story is, what we're trying to do. And hey, Tim, it's good to see you. Frankenstein.
So with mine, the story is already written. Every single paragraph is done. I just have to make the diction and the sentence structure simpler for children.
Yeah.
I'm hating it. I have been pushing it off for months.
Right.
My husband can attest to it. I've really been putting it off because I just don't want to simplify my wording.
Yeah. So at this point, I'd be like, okay, so I'm smelling, I'm hearing the rats, I'm smelling the odors, and I hear the rattle of chains. The next thing I would do is feel the manacles on my arms and legs, right?
Iron. I would say they would be iron. Iron tends to be painful to Fae, including elves. Especially the dark elves for some reason. Iron and silver are two metals that have always been painful to magical species. And occasionally gold. But that's rare.
So she doesn't know how she got there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of old Irish fairy tales and the Tuatha De Danann myths from Ireland. So
like in Tir na Nog?
Yeah, Tir na Nog, Briette, all the Morrigan Raven.
Oh, yeah.
The
Morrigan is one of my favorites.
Yes. Chooser of the Slain, just like the Norse Valkyries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very steeped in a lot of the Greek and Roman mythos, the Norse mythos, and the greater Celtic mythos.
Nice.
The Wild Hunt, things like that. Because one thing leads to another, right? I loved Arthurian legend. I read The Lady Stuart when I was really too young to really read her.
Read The Lady of Shalott in college.
Yeah, it's, if you're not aware, it's a retelling of the Arthurian mythos where Merlin was actually the son of Uther's older brother, Ambrosius Pendragon, who started the war and was defeated by the 7 kings of the Celtic realm of Britain. And they were Romans. And Uther took over, and the shenanigans ensued with, having Merlin grow up. And it's from Merlin's point of view as a boy growing up and then having to take on these kings and guide Uther and Arthur. And then what happens with Mordred in the end.
Yeah, and with Uther's and having to deal with Uther's hatred of magic as well, or was that just in the TV show?
That was really in the movie, in the TV show. But the biggest thing was that because they were related, it gave a more realistic. When Merlin was learning magic, he was learning about anatomy of creatures and sciences.
But at the same time, he was also of royal blood. So technically, he has a claim to the throne.
Correct.
So that would explain why
he has a better claim than Uther.
Yeah. So technically, Merlin should be the king, but Uther doesn't. But Uther's on the throne. So I can see where
the magic comes in where Merlin was a seer more than anything.
Yes.
And it takes you into the crystal cave. It takes you how he began seeing in the flames, and he saw the white dragon being defeated by the red dragon and things like that. With Vortigern. Well, that led into, okay, there are obvious references in these stories to the Celtic mythoses. So I started reading up on those because I'm a traditionalist. I grew up reading philosophy, Plato and Socrates and Aristotle.
Nice.
I think everybody who writes stories should start there.
Definitely start with the classics.
It's not a requirement because there are just people out there that are just talented.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of us who struggle and want to, understand the world in general and how because everything about our society is based on storytelling. When we get home from work, we tell our spouse a story about how our day went. When we're watching the news, somebody's telling us a story. When we're explaining how to fix something, we're telling somebody a story, even if it's an instructional in nature. Storytelling.
That's why the bard's profession has always been so important throughout history.
Yes. And that's one of the things Hollywood has forgotten. Fortunately, they'll remember eventually.
But too late. And by then we'll probably have taken over entertainment.
Yeah, that's what the hope is. And maybe not taken over, but morphed it in, because there's definitely very talented people who work in Hollywood.
Definitely. But they are pushed down by the people who have no talent.
It's corporations.
They don't understand. Yeah, corporations don't understand that good writing is what sells.
George Lucas invented independent filmmaking, made it mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
And then became the mega corporation and sold out to a bigger one.
True, which he never should have done. He should never have sold to Disney.
He said in one of the documentaries that he became the thing that he fought against.
Yeah.
And it is true.
Yeah.
So now we've got a situation. We've relayed important information. So this is the draft, right?
It is a good opening.
Let me.
I like it. I like it a lot.
So yes. Now we will go on in the rewrite and add details to further sink the reader into the story, right? So now she doesn't know where she is, but as we said before, because she's older, and because we've already established she's a dark elf. This was not the first time. Now I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Had found herself in such a situation. But it was the first time she could not remember how it started.
All right, so now she's awake, and we want to get a sense of her attitude. Would she be angry? Would she be disgusted? Would she be frightened? Would she be sad?
I would think that if this has happened before, she'd be more calculating. Like, seriously, again? All right, let's work on how to figure out how to get out of here. I just find that cooler.
Okay.
Because, like, the whole, oh my gosh, what's going on? What do I do? Trope has already been done. So why not just make someone who is treating this as though it's normal? Not necessarily having to make her a psychopath, mind you, but just she's been in such a situation, so she has some experience.
How's that? I thought Sid would be an appropriate.
That is an appropriate nickname, yeah. That's not bad.
So, adverb. So yeah, I do. Oh, it's in my bedroom at the other house that we're staying at. I do have a copy, and I recommend everybody getting one if you want to write stories of Elements of Style by Strunk and White. I believe it's on the 5th edition. It's a little book about, I don't know, 30 pages maybe. And it gives you basic rules of style to writing, what to do, what not to do. The rule, take out what's not the story, is the number one rule in that story, in that book. Things like don't use adverbs, don't overly use adjectives. You want, the equally important rule as to show, don't tell, and what that means. And it is very succinct. So I could spend 45-minute video telling people how to show, not tell, and they tell you in a couple of pages very simply, and it's very well put. And this is T.H. White. This is the Once a Future King. This is a novelist from the beginnings where people get inspired. And it's his college professor, Strunk. They created this Element of Style book. And it was one of the main, it's probably the only how to write book you will ever need, because in my opinion, especially from my perspective as an American growing up in America, you have 12 years of grammar. You know how to write.
Mm-hmm.
It sinks into us from second grade to we have grammar classes as the seniors in high school, or at least we should.
Yeah, they actually, in some states, grammar is no longer necessary for graduation because it is racist.
Well, anyway, I know all of my generation who graduated high school, they taught us grammar, the same rules over and over again for 10 years.
Yeah, same.
So you have that toolbox, even if it's in the back of your mind, even if you've spent nothing but 20 years doing mechanic work or being an accountant, you know how to tell a story. We've all done it. We all had to tell stories about what we did over summer vacation at least once. So you know how to do that. The rules, what make people understand what you're trying to tell them, are the elements of style. And I would also say, if you're going to tell narratives, read anything that Campbell put out about the hero's journey.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is how we have been telling stories since Beowulf.
Again, Beowulf. Such a classic and such an epic story. Still love Grendel.
So, let's say, among those sounds came hints of others. Other birds. Or at least one.
Leaves room for there to be multiple.
Yeah, we could do that.
If we want to add more characters, or if we just want to add throwaway characters that are heading for the execution block.
So we'll do.
I like writing executions. I just like writing death. Sorry. Probably not necessary here right now. The mood, Olympus. Because I mentioned death?
Oh, nah. See, that's good stuff.
I know. There are so many different ways to do it. It's always so much fun. Plus, it's not legal in real life.
So now we got to figure out how this interaction is going to be. So we've got a, let's say, middle-aged elf, dark elf.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, let's do the opposite of what we normally do and do a young dwarf, right? So that his perceptions and his biases are a little bit more razor edged, right?
Yeah, and not your average dwarves either.
Right.
So generally, when you have a dwarven character, they're a little bit older, sometimes around the same age as an elf. Definitely, dwarves are usually depicted as older or middle-aged men of their race.
Right.
Yeah, you never really get to see any dwarven children, and even rarer are any dwarven women. If they exist at all, according to Tolkien.
There's an old Irish adage that you really need to know when to say fuck and when it's appropriate to say feck.
Or what? Your mom will chase you with a wooden spoon?
Usually it was torches and lamp oil, but they had a hard life, those old dogs from Ireland.
Yeah, that could be why they're drunk all the time.
Yeah, when you got nothing but potatoes to eat.
Hey, I love potatoes.
I do too. I can't.
I mean, over Passover, it's literally one of the only things we can eat. And even after 8 days of nothing but potatoes and cardboard bread, I'm still loving potatoes.
But, you know, doesn't the rituals and things like that kind of clear your mind?
Well, not when you have to complete a Passover purge, which is 100 times worse than a typical spring cleaning.
Oh, yeah.
Trust me.
I found that the Jewish faith, a lot of those kind of things were instituted to keep people clean and healthy.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of Jewish laws, and I speak as an Orthodox Jew. There are a lot of the religious laws have to do with hygiene and cleanliness.
Right. Like I was always taught that the circumcision thing came because people would get infections and die. Because
but interestingly, the reason it's done specifically 8 days after the birth is because that's when the blood begins clotting in a newborn.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't survive it.
We didn't have anticoagulants and things like that back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is they didn't cook pork right, so you couldn't eat pigs. I mean, there was
that and the rule about that the kosher meat has to be from an animal that both chews its cud and has split hooves. A pig only has one. Has split hooves, does not chew its cud.
There's definitely a spiritual aspect to it as well as a more scientific reasoning aspect.
Oh, there is. If you've read the commentaries for Torah, there are commentaries for commentaries for commentaries.
Yeah. Well, there are so many.
There are so many.
New Testament.
Yeah, but specifically with the Old Testament, there are literally so many rules and testimonies, commentaries, because a lot of the old sages had disagreements on what things really meant. There are so many different interpretations. And which one you go with depends on which level of Judaism you follow. Like some people take the be fruitful and multiply, literally meaning fruit. At least that's one I heard once, that someone took that to mean plant trees. Not to just have children. I mean, if you want to go with that interpretation, we could use more trees.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
All right. So this
Oh,
is what we
that's
talked
good.
about. So we're gonna go with these characters know something about what's going on, even more than what we know as the writer at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So this is what they, if you ever hear the term pantser, this is what they're talking about. We're letting the characters have this conversation, and my mind, when I'm writing this, that's why I go quiet, is because I'm seeing it in my head.
Oh, I do that too.
And when I get on a roll, it can go last 4 or 6 hours. I might write a chapter that I end up having to cut into 2 or 3 chapters.
I've done that before too.
Yeah. And then eventually cut one of those chapters out or something when I'm doing the last edit.
Or completely rewrite a chapter, which I've done.
Well, for example, the prologue I wrote for Circles Driven is about a character that comes into being. The main character is a thief. He was an aristocrat, and then a war came, and he was ousted. And he started living on the streets, and he created an alternate personality called the Thief, who took over and killed people and stole things and kept him alive. Well, at the beginning of the story, he wakes up and he's in a desolate, arid setting that's nothing but black sand and hills of black and black stone. There's no green, there's no nothing. The skies are gray and washed out. The only thing in the distance is this castle. Well, he gets there, and long story short, it turns out that it's the castle of the Queen of Darkness, Celine, and she needs a thief, but she needs a very special thief. She names him Loathe, and she basically tortures this aristocrat until the personality separates and becomes a body thief, where he can jump from body to body.
Ooh, body jumping. That's always tricky.
Which I was inspired by
Quantum Leap?
Lestat and the Body Thief.
Hmm.
There was a Anne Rice novel in the vampire series called The Body Thief.
Ah.
And I read that when I was about 19 or 20. Something like that. So this story is an amalgamation of those things that went on. But in the original story, Loathe, after everybody comes together in this town, Loathe has taken over the mayor's body and gives an orb to them to take to the city of wizards to find out what it is. And that orb is actually the key, and it's what causes Chloe to become the Queen of Darkness, to release her into it. Well,
Cool.
I'm changing that. Instead of him giving it to them, he set it up to where they find it on their way to Calathrae. He just kicks them out of town because they get into the gratuitous bar fight in town at the tavern. Because it was a Dungeons and Dragons story. So it is a quest story, and in where they find the orb is in a city called Rokthaga, and it is a dwarven city in the side of a cliff that is run by wizards, and they basically, it's a crossroads city where the southern half of the continent sends its grains and stuff up for the wizards to buy in Calathrae, and then that's on the east side of the mountains. On the west side of the mountains is a tundra where barbarians tribes are. Well, there is an Efreet that is set loose upon them in that city, which is the ode to Tolkien, that they have to, fight and stuff. Wow. So you're going to have to, for conciseness and so that you're going to write things that are going to sound contrived when you go back through them.
Oh, absolutely. That's why editing is important.
Well, this is also why, because our brains are wondrous things, you have to, once you write, for example, a novel, Stephen King recommends this, and I also recommend this. It's in audiobook, and he does it in his own voice. he actually reads it on Writing a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And one of the things that that he does or that he found was that you're going to end up letting the story get away from you. And then when you get it finished, you put it away. You have to put it away for at least 6 months. And if you have a better memory, even longer. Because if you reread it immediately, the holes get filled in by your brain. So if you've left something out that is a necessary explanation or a reasoning behind why a character does a certain action, you haven't put it in there. If you don't wait long enough and you reread it, you're not going to see that hole.
Yeah. Interestingly, I actually was given pretty much that same advice in a business writing course in college. He said,
Yes.
if you write it, and if you're stuck, walk away, take a break, do something else, and then come back, because your subconscious, while you're doing something else, your subconscious will fill in the holes and you can keep on writing afterwards. Brilliant advice. I have done it before and it has worked.
Yes. So, what I do, I don't have the necessary time to let it rest on that. So I get a secondary opinion. I'll let my wife read it and she'll tell me what doesn't make sense to her.
Yeah, I've had my husband help with that a few times.
And usually your spouse is pretty good about not being a yes person.
That's true. Master always makes sure to give me his honest answer with this.
Because a writer's main companion, other than their muse, is that little monster of self-doubt that rests on every writer's shoulder.
And procrastination. You can ask my husband. I am a queen of procrastination.
Every writer is. That's why one of these days I want to have enough money to have me a cabin where all I have is maybe power to run my laptop, and that's it.
Yes, but the problem with a laptop is that sometimes it also has internet. So what you have to have, because Microsoft Word does not need internet to run.
I know.
So that's why I want just have a cabin that has no internet. Can I join you?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at places like Colorado, like in the San Juan Mountains.
Yeah, I'm further on the West Coast, so that probably won't work. We don't have as many forests here because some of them caught fire.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
I want a cabin in the woods.
It seems like every time
I want a castle in the woods.
So I grew up in the 90s, and for a decade we were in a drought, and California was fine.
Yeah.
Now the situations are reversed, and we're overloaded with water, and California is in a drought for the last decade. I think it switches back and forth.
Yeah, I guess
I've talked to older folks who said this happened before.
Yeah. I mean, the year Master and I were engaged, there was snow in California.
Yeah. I mean, it snowed here in Texas in May in 1986.
I hate snow.
I do too.
It's too cold. It is literally the blanket of death. Literally. Have you ever noticed all the trees are dead and then the ground is covered by a white blanket?
Yep. Well, not just that, it's cold. It's wet.
Uh-huh. It's dead. It's lifeless. And bright. And
loud.
It's literally a cycle of life and death, the seasons.
Yeah. Well, so but I forgot what I was talking about.
We were talking about stepping away from writing for a bit to let the creative.
Yeah. All right. So usually, what I've been doing is I'll let one rest and I'll go back and write something else while it's resting. That seems to be pretty good for me. But not everybody can just come up with ideas like I do. And I used to, for years, it's just been in the last couple of years I've been able to, because I forced myself to. Now, it's very hard on everybody else in my life because I'm not really in the real world half the time.
Yeah.
I'm walking around in a haze because I'm thinking about stories all the time. It makes me seem a little flighty, which I've always been the opposite of.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I'm less so in in these past first 3 years of marriage.
Yeah, Olympus gets it. Yeah, he's from the South too. So, But I do love Colorado. I do love natural places, but that comes from my background of growing up in the wilderness and in very rural areas.
Lucky. My mom was such an American princess.
Uh,
My mom, we connect. Even today, my mom will not go on a hike. After one time, we took her on the trail and she saw a snake that was only 5 inches long. My mom has a serious snake phobia.
yeah, heck, we were coming home yesterday, or we were coming home the other day from the Renaissance Fair, and my son freaked out because a spider was in the truck, and I think we almost crashed. And
I love spiders,
but he's pretty sheltered. I remember growing up, we would hang a pig in the tree and slaughter it and put it in the freezer because that was a normal part of life.
True.
We did. Our milk cow, which we milked every morning, was out feeding one morning in the pasture, and some hunters run her off in the creek and broke her legs. We drug her up to the house and we butchered her and put her in the freezer. And kids nowadays, they couldn't even comprehend doing that.
I know, right? They say, "No, that's animal abuse." No, it's not. It's recycling food. She can't make milk anymore, so now she'll be our meat.
Right.
They're such pansies.
Yeah. Well, that's just, sometimes I have what I like to say it called generational dissonance.
Or grit.
Well,
but I think your word is fancier.
I'm like, sometimes I wake up and think I'm in the Matrix. Because
have you seen the mathematical patterns in nature?
Yeah, well, not just that. It's that things are so different than they were growing up for the first 25, 30 years of my life. I had a pager. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet.
Oh, I remember pagers. My dad had one.
I
was 3 back then.
My first wife really liked pagers.
I remember my mom had a BlackBerry.
When we were dating, we would go to the skating rink. I would put my pager in her front pocket and then go and make random phone calls to her so it would buzz in her pocket while she was roller skating.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. We did a lot. That's the other thing is I find that I got better at writing because I lived a life. You know,
yeah.
I was in the military. I went overseas. I've met a whole wide range of people. I'm religious, not overtly so, but I chose my religion because I was raised by agnostics.
Yeah.
I read commentaries on the Torah. I read the Quran. I've read even, the Book of Mormon.
Oh, wow.
And I chose to be what I am because it felt right to me.
Mm-hmm.
So in saying that, I also, because I studied those things, have an empathy for other perspectives. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does.
I mean, I have a gay uncle that was changed his name and was brised and converted into Judaism.
Oh, wow. I have cousins who sit on Santa's lap and hunt Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm.
I've also got on the other side of the family, I have relatives in the Hasidic community, which is extremely bubbled. If you've ever watched through it, they don't.
I think outsiders. The biggest thing that I take away from Christianity is that really the second covenant is to be kind.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That is definitely a very, very big rule.
Yeah. So I think if you do your best to be kind, even with writing, I wrote a story about what was going on at Disney World with letting them have blue hair for Snow White and showing their tattoos and things like that. And I was like, who is this decision going to hurt? Is this going to hurt anybody? No, it's not going to hurt anybody. I can do it.
Yeah.
So
I think with me, the reason I'm able to write, like you said, you lived a life, you've had experience. With me, despite growing up in an Orthodox Jewish community, with the type of community that you might see on Saturdays, men with suits and black hats walking around, that's how Master and I grew up.
Yeah.
But my dad's father worked, may he rest in peace, he worked in the entertainment industry for a time. So my dad actually grew up with some nerd culture. That's why we were introduced to Star Wars as children. My dad would literally just rent the movies, and we'd sit by the fireplace roasting marshmallows while watching the original Star Wars. So
Yeah.
I got to have, and my dad also, because my mom worked on Sundays at the time, my dad would be the one to take my brothers and I out on hikes or to the movies or other things. But mainly because, like I said, my grandfather worked for a time. I'm not going to say what he did because there's really no need to. But my grandfather worked in entertainment. So
Yeah.
therefore, my father was exposed to entertainment. My dad is grew up a massive comics fan and still has all of his original comics and boxes in the attic.
Yeah. Well, I went at 3 years old and saw Star Wars. I've told this story 1,000 times. And that was the next day that my dad bought me a book. And it was a book of Bible stories. And my mom started teaching me to read that next day because I wanted to know how they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been on that path. My dad bought my first typewriter, a manual typewriter, when I was 10 years old. And then he bought me an electronic typewriter when I was about 14. But I never saw him read a thing.
Yeah.
Ever.
I only ever saw my dad reading comic books. And sometimes I would steal them from him because I wanted to read them too.
Well, and you know, I have other things like my great grandfather was a World War II hero.
Oh, nice.
He had Congressional Medal of Honor, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts.
My salutes to him.
And he was also a race car driver. He was also a very bad criminal. He robbed banks. He counterfeited money for the mob. He was friends with Jack Ruby.
Wow.
Yes.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
He killed Oswald.
Ah, gotcha.
He was a mob. My uncle was killed by a police officer with mob ties.
And my uncle is a police officer.
Who, well, this police officer was never allowed to make it to court.
Ah.
There was a lot of things like that growing up. So it's like sometimes I think I'm a bridge from a bygone era into this one because I'm a technician. I'm a computer guy. You know, I grew up without any of it on a farm, and now I do it for a living. So sometimes I have what I call, instead of cognitive dissonance, I have generational dissonance.
That's a good phrase.
So I think somebody even did a video on me called I think it was the Tales of StoryMan-Jack or something. But yeah, it's that kind of experience, and you can get that through reading. Because God forbid we have another world war. God forbid society breaks down enough that where everybody has to fend for themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish although I had a great childhood because I have great parents and everything, but we once moved into a house that had no floor. We had to put a floor in it before we could even, we lived in it for 2 months without a floor. It had dirt floors.
Oh my gosh, our family was the exact opposite. We were moving at the time, and we ended up staying in a house that was that the people did not tell my parents was in the middle of construction. They said, "Oh no, while you're there, they're not going to do anything." While they were there, they literally tore up the floor, and we were walking on dirt.
Yeah, and well, it was an old farmhouse. It's not there anymore, but
yeah, we were in the suburbs, so it is.
He had to cut a hole in the outer wall so that we could have a wood stove because there was no heat in the house. Mm-hmm. Things like that.
Oh, my mom's house in South Africa was the same way. Yeah, my mom was born in South Africa, and they had a boiler. They had, I think, a boiler heater.
Yeah.
But the type that only heats up one area. There was no central ventilation heating system. Oh, hi there.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for dropping by. I forgot I could do this. Otherwise, I'd highlighted other ones.
I mean, this is definitely holding me accountable, considering how lazy I have been with my writing.
Yeah,
I have people waiting for for the next chapter of one of my stories that the last time I actually gave an update about it was maybe 7 to 8 months ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. Right now with the fire and everything, I'm lucky I'm getting anything out every week. So
Well, that's fair.
like,
I have, like I said, I have housework, and we've also got religious holidays coming up.
yeah,
This
and
Friday starts a 72-hour period of no technology.
yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, another one, right? Didn't y'all have one like a couple months ago?
Yeah, that was Passover. This one is Shavuot.
Yeah.
So literally 72 hours of no tech, no pens.
That doesn't help
nothing.
the algorithm, does it?
No, it doesn't. But it also means that we're going to be bored out of our minds. I know Master was really not looking forward to it. He hates the 3-day ones.
Well, yeah, especially like I'm working 96 hours this week, so and then the fire, we're gonna have to relocate again so they can get the floors down.
Yeah.
I'll probably have to work from my garage on my laptop.
At least you'll be able to work.
Yeah.
72 hours of not being able to write a single word. You think you'd be able to do that? Because trust me, it's hard.
But it's just technology. Does it mean pen and paper too?
Yeah, pen and paper included. No pen and paper.
Oh wow!
Everything literally can. It's literally 3 days of Sabbath. Put it that way.
Okay. Well, maybe
our Saturday Sabbath. No tech, no pens, no paper, no turning on a light switch, no cooking. Everything has to be pre-cooked. So many different rules and regulations. All of them transferred over to certain holidays. Except with the holidays, you're allowed to cook.
Yeah. Oh, well.
But no pen and paper, no computer, no writing. Everything has to stay in my head, and it is the worst.
All right. So I have having 2 degrees and knowing what it takes to get a degree back in 1999, I would say that what you're doing, Sam, is actually you're working with your editing and your stuff for your college. That adds to what you can do writing wise as well. The best thing college can ever do for anybody who wants to write, even if you go and just get a straight literature degree or a straight
I just got a bachelor's. I literally just got a bachelor's in English for mine.
I have a English language arts degree, bachelor's degree, and I have a sociology degree from OU.
Nice.
But what the best thing it did for me was force me to learn how to write.
Yeah, definitely the same.
Because you're writing papers day after day after day after day.
Yeah, I was so like in high school, I was so used to having 2 to 3 months to write a paper, and then in college, it was like, nope, you only have 2 weeks. What? And it also really did. I noticed how much I improved over those few years because
we even had daily essays.
The first paper I ever wrote in college, I got a B. And it was the very first B I had ever gotten in an English writing course. So it really put me into perspective on how much I needed to improve. And by the end, I was getting all A's again.
Well, and that's the other thing, right? It's like, if my son wants to go to college, that's fine. But I'm going to pick a college that's not woke.
Oh, yeah. It's very hard to find these days. I remember now that I'm not in the college and I'm recognizing the signs of woke, I now think back to it and can see, yeah, my college was starting to head there.
Right.
At the time, even. Like, around Halloween, they had posters up saying, I am a culture, not a costume.
All right. So
I also had a poetry teacher that hated my guts.
Yeah. That I got sociology so I could understand societal things.
I just took anthropology class.
Yeah, and then because my first degree was free, I had to use my GI Bill on something. So I did that, and then I went to culinary school.
Ooh,
But
good choice.
I went to culinary school just so I could. I like to cook. My dad always cooked when I was a kid, the big events. But I went because the fastest way to a girl's heart is through her stomach.
I thought I was a man. But then
It
again,
works,
but then again, I love food too. So
it's well when I can make um, steak with strawberry sauce and
that already sounds
parboiled frites, and
that already sounds delicious, especially
yeah,
the steak part.
steak with strawberry sauce.
Suck
I've
it,
done it with
vegans.
raspberry sauce. Yeah, it's you know, it's something that we can that you and a significant other can do together,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really the key to good relationship is to always be able to do things together, be able to do things apart, yes, as well, because you don't need to be on each other all the time, but have
Definitely
fun
true.
doing something that has an outcome that's good. Or, I mean, I've made some really bad experimental stuff, and we've ordered pizza. All right, so let's just go through what we have so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what we have so far is great.
This was not the first time Obsidian found herself in such a situation. Oh, that's all the way up. She woke to the sound of scuffling rats, involuntarily pulling her legs close. She drowsed awake to the stench of unwashed bodies, mildew, and decay. The rattle of the chains, however, is what brought her fully aware. The slight burn told the older dark elf woman that she had been taken. All right, I'm going to highlight this because So one of the things I do when I'm editing is I read things out loud, and if I stumble over them, I want to go back and look at them later.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I definitely reread a lot of my own stuff to see if I can improve it.
Right. The slight burn told the older dark elf woman that she had been taken, that they had bound her with cold iron. This was not the first time Obsidian found herself in such a situation. It was the first time she'd been taken unaware. Though fear was there, she knew from long experience that panic was the last thing that would help. Focus, Sid, she told herself, as she listened to the sounds around her. Among those came hints of other prisoners, or at least one. Who's there? Sid asked out to the darkness with a hoarse whisper. A grunt came back, but the sound struck her as if one who'd voiced it did not really care. Save your breath, a gravelly voice responded. Why? Where are we? That needs a comma. Feckin' elf, a woman, the dwarf grunted. All this time, and finally I get some company, and it's a feckin' elf. Shit, Sid sighed. Name's Obsidian Alcora, she told the darkness. Feck me, he found you, the voice replied. Who found what? Sid asked. But she already knew. Part of it, anyway. You don't know, the voice chuckled. It came out like ground sand. So that's pretty good.
I love it. I really, really like it. That sounded great.
Yeah.
Yay, teamwork!
Yeah, right? So a long time ago, I decided that I was going to write and not for money. I don't need fame. I don't need fortune. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers simply to pay my costs for Adobe and such. You know what I mean? Just so that my YouTube channel is paying for itself, and that's not an extra expense. It probably costs me $300 a month to run my channel.
Whoa!
Because I try to make it as best as I can, and I have a subscription to like the intro that we have. I go on Place It and I make it there. I have a year subscription for unlimited videos. That's the other thing I'm doing with those story streams that I'm doing is that I'm highlighting other channels that are less known than mine, or just needs a lot of love to get subscriptions. If you watch the fantasy story stream from last week, between every chapter is a short little advertisement for a YouTube channel.
Oh, very cool. We do a
So
similar thing in which we, at the end of our psychosynopsis, we shout out a channel as our quote remedy of the week.
yeah, and
After we
you guys,
after Master diagnoses it with a mental disorder.
yeah, and you guys are where I got that idea. I figured out while at the same time writing and showing people how to write, and that everybody can do it.
Mm-hmm, definitely,
Everybody can do it.
It just takes a lot of commitment.
Yes, it does. It does. Once you commit to sitting down and writing it, you have to finish it. Otherwise, it's going to nag at you forever.
Oh yes.
For example, that story that I've been highlighting throughout this, I started writing it 30 years ago.
Yeah, I got so many unfinished works in progress. It's ridiculous.
Well, I wrote 36 chapters of that novel.
Oh, wow.
It was bad. The original rough draft was bad.
I don't even want to open my original rough draft of the first thing I ever wrote.
Well, this wasn't. I had been published in Asimov's and Alfred Hitchcock science mystery magazine out of Britain in the 90s, before I even graduated high school.
Good for you.
So, but that doesn't exist anymore. You can't write for publications anymore. Not really. You can write for online magazines or e-zines, but you don't get any credit. And a lot of those are not really taking unsolicited stories. Yeah. It's not like Stephen King became a writer because he wrote full-length short stories for things like Playboy, for things like the digests. They don't have any of that anymore.
That's true.
And like Reader's Digest, even, they have staff writers. They don't let anybody submit unsolicited stuff anymore. So the old way you got published was that you either knew somebody or you built a reputation with short stories at magazines. Mm-hmm. And then you would get your idea, you would write your novel, you take on an agent, they would take you on because you had all these published works. And then you would go through the publishing process.
Yeah, definitely easier back then than it is today.
Now you have to know somebody.
Yeah.
Or you go Indiegogo, you put it on Amazon, and you promote it as best you can. That was actually the reason I switched my YouTube channel from a commentary channel to a writing channel. Huh. Because I thought about it and I said, I'm saying the same thing everybody else is. Why don't I put my money where my mouth is and show people how to do it themselves instead of just blasting Disney all the time? Mm-hmm. So I've been doing this for 2 years and I have over 100 stories.
Very
on
good.
My channel. So I'm like the Robert Howard of YouTube. And if you've never read Conan, please read Conan, because Conan is a very intelligent character and very articulate character.
I will definitely look into that and put it on my incredibly long to-be-read list.
It is not as portrayed by the movies.
I never actually saw the movies.
Well, Schwarzenegger in particular didn't speak English at the time, so not well. So he had very minimal lines, and he sounded like a trope barbarian. Right?
What's wrong with that?
Yeah. But Conan wasn't a trope barbarian. Conan was a super intelligent leader. And he was articulate.
Cool.
But it's very difficult to read the works of Howard because they're not in chronological order at all.
Yeah, that can be difficult. I know Master prefers stories to be in an order that he can understand what's going on. Like if it starts, it's like I lent him my copy of The Gunslinger for The Dark Tower to read, and because it started off in the middle of the story, he just lost interest immediately.
Yeah, but the thing about that is, as you get toward the end of the first story, you get his backstory.
Oh yeah, and I love it.
Yeah,
and the ending of the Drawing of Three really had my jaw dropping. My mind was so blown.
What was in that? So we had The Stand in there. We had Salem's Lot in there.
Salem's Lot. There was
the glimpse of The Shining.
Uh-huh.
Dragon's Eye, which was his fantasy story.
I think
that
I
was
actually have
based
a
on.
copy of that book. I need to read it then. There was also something about Oz. Or
Yeah.
at least there
And
was
then-
there was a Emerald
And it's
palette.
all based in Arthurian legend.
He had Merlin in there. Literally, they had Merlin, and they descended from the line
And
of
King
Arthur
Arthur.
Eld. Yeah,
Yes.
Arthur Eld.
Yes.
The gunslingers were descended from Arthur.
Yeah, and I have this theory that even the three main religions that show there's a God, the whole purpose that people have taken on is to understand God. That's why science was invented, to understand how he did things. It wasn't to disprove that he did it. It was to understand how he did it. So I believe that there is a reason we can't understand. We can't wrap our hand around omniscience. We're human beings. We're a linear people. Our brain works, our logic works in a linear fashion.
And in a finite fashion, whereas
Correct.
God is infinite.
If my theory is right, and every story, every choice is a different reality, and God controls all that, that would make sense. If there's an infinite number of realities and a being controls that, we're not going to understand it. We're not going to understand the purpose. That's also why I believe that taking a human life is the worst possible thing you could ever do to anybody.
Yeah.
Because it takes potential out of this machine that is humanity, and we're here for a reason.
And completely erases a potential timeline.
Correct. Or who knows? That could have been the next Einstein, the next Tolkien, the next George Lucas.
Anything. The next anything, really.
Correct. So it's not just the things that I believe is not just in a religious way, it's also in a logical way. So my stories tend to reflect that. But I don't try to tell a message. If you're writing correctly, your views and your message is going to come out naturally in the flow of the story. Somebody asked me once if I would tell a transgender story. And I told them absolutely I would, but I would have to know some transgender folks to get that perspective, because I would not do it justice, right?
Yeah, same. I literally don't write any kind of queer story because I have no experience with it.
Yeah, I agree with Master, because I read the last Harry Potter book in about
Are you talking
3 hours.
about the Cursed Child? Or
No,
the Deathly Hallows?
The Hallows.
Which
you could have thrown about 3/4 of the middle of that book away, and it would have still been a bit.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I just remember being, 10
got
years
lost.
old and 10 years. I just remember being about 10 years old and then literally waiting for my copy to come in the mail. I literally asked the mail. It came on the Sabbath, so I literally asked the mailman to open it for me.
Oh, nice.
I was so impatient.
But yeah, we wanted to read them before we let the kids read them to make sure they were okay. Because we don't just take the word of people. There were older folks at our church that said it was bad. I'm like, we're just going to read it and find out, and it was great.
Yeah,
there was a lot of religious iconography.
I loved it back then, and I'm still a Harry Potter fan.
And people only look at the surface level of what they're taught. Yeah. Yes, it says do not suffer with which to live, but you have to define what that is.
Yeah, that's why there are so many commentaries and interpretations in the Jewish culture. Because there are many different ways to interpret it, and because the spirituality of Judaism is finding your own relationship with God. There is no one way to do everything. It is how you do it. That is the main point in Judaism.
It is also the same thing in Christianity if you read it. And same
well,
thing.
Christianity. Well, technically, Christianity was based off Judaism, so
was Islam.
Don't hate me.
Yeah. I mean, it's just. I think a lot of it had
Mary,
to do.
Mary, I am a proud Slytherin by choice.
Yeah, there you are.
I'm technically a Ravenclaw, but I choose to be in Slytherin because Slytherin is much cooler. Oh no! All you have to do is when you're taking the test is choose all the answers that you know will get you in Slytherin. That's what I do.
Mine is boring.
You sound like a Hufflepuff then.
No, I'm a Gryffindor.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought Hufflepuffs were the boring ones.
Well, it's everybody
Then
wanted to be a
again,
Gryffindor, so
technically, J.K. Rowling has said herself that she is a Hufflepuff. So,
yeah,
even though Merlin was a Slytherin canonically, the author
yeah.
of the books is a Hufflepuff, so Hufflepuffs automatically win.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so
But yeah, this so far, what we've got here is pretty good. I like it.
how long do you think?
Sounds like he'd be there maybe between a week to a month, given his attitude. He doesn't sound like, it doesn't, to me, the way his dialogue is going, it doesn't sound like he was in there for a year. It's definitely less than a year by his dialogue. Yeah, so I'd say a few months is good. In the dark, with nothing, in the dark, eating gruel with no company but the rats. Because when you are in a dungeon alone, technically the rats are your only company, besides what remains of your sanity. I like it. I like it a lot. This is really coming up. This is really coming together.
Yeah, so all I'm doing is trying to flesh out their relationship as it starts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking he's a thief,
Sounds like it.
or better yet,
At least a cut purse.
let's think about this for a minute.
Grudge Soulforge.
How about we do this? And make the antagonist the secondary characters in disguise.
Ooh.
A twist.
Nice twist as well.
Like she begins to do the trusting, and that's how a dragon might use his intellect in order to get what he needed.
Mm-hmm. Or just what he wants.
Right.
Dragons are clever creatures. All hail dragons.
So now we have to figure out what she is to him, what he needs, and where, the way I see it going is they figure out what he's after. It's something to do with her bloodline. Only she can do something or open something. And they hatch a plan to escape.
Yeah.
And at the end of the escape, he actually leads her to the thing. Blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, if she's wearing shackles, like I suggested, wearing shackles that specifically negate her power. One thing I'm thinking of is, and I'm taking this from a scene in Daredevil, where they fashioned a shiv out of their brother's bones because the rats had eaten through it and they managed to sharpen one. I'm thinking, what if they kill a rat, pretend to be eating it, and end up sharpening one of its rib bones to use as a lockpick.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Has that been done before? I feel like it might have been done before, but it's what popped into my head.
Maybe, but we're all just retelling the same stories.
That is true. There is really no such thing as an original story anymore. They have all been told already.
Right.
You just have to find new ways to tell them.
Right, because humans act a certain way. We're pretty predictable, to be honest.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately.
All right, so I'm about to write myself in a corner, I think. All right, so I think he's already going to have the lockpick ready.
Well, if he's been with the rats for a while, that would make sense to me.
And he's going to portray himself as a thief or cut purse, or like he stumbled onto this stronghold or whatever, and whatever. Like he knew the warlock had magic items or something.
Yeah, something he would want to steal. Or that he thought would be worth a pretty penny. I mean, I suppose we could go with that stereotype that dwarves like gold, but is that a stereotype? I mean, they are miners.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, they're always surrounded by jewels because they work in mines. So, And again, gold is also something that you mine. Then again, dragons prefer treasure more. They actually find it very comforting to their underbellies, which is a very weak part of their scaly armor.
All right, so
I think I can
now
help.
We need.
Gotta wait for the guards to start drinking.
Yeah, now we. Well, that's what I was trying to say, is that there are no guards to.
Yeah, but there would be no need if they get their food from a hole.
Yeah. All right. Does that make more sense?
Let's see. No ching in that armor, no guards to fall asleep or catch off their game. Yes, that does make more sense.
Okay. Now I'm going to set up parameters.
Like world rules?
Well, a little bit.
World building is always so much fun. You can literally do anything. The only problem is that it has to make sense. Unlike reality, which doesn't make sense at all.
right, so I'm gonna put this back up here. This is one of the things I do a lot. That's probably still out of place, but
Yeah, that's why editing is important.
yes.
Sometimes I just go with. Sometimes what I do is I'll just write it as it comes out of my head, and then I'll edit it when I come back after a break.
Right. Well, and then something like this, I'm trying to set up the parameter to close off any loopholes that he is going to have to be her only chance to get out of this.
I mean, you can't have a rat being a person in disguise. I feel like that would be a cliche.
Okay. So he just happens to have what she needs. So this is one of those things that you need to point out that it's what Disney does. It's what Star Wars does. They have just something suddenly happen to help, right? The way you get around that.
Ex machinas.
Right. So the way I'm getting around that is to explain that it's a lucky, how that lucky situation could come about.
Because he's already been there for a few months now. Plenty of time to chew a bone into a lockpick.
She would naturally be skeptical because the reader's skeptical.
Yeah.
So you have to drive this in such a way that's believable. That's that rule everybody talks about, telling the truth. Because if it's not possible, you can't suspend your disbelief. Now, we know magic's not possible, right? But we know that physics exists.
Oh, yeah.
There are certain things that we can suspend because we know magic's not real. We know that we're getting into. But if you go and start breaking rules and not telling the truth about how something works, going back to world building, if you're going to make things different than what they are in reality, you have to build that in the world.
Yeah.
You have to explain the reasoning.
Have to set the boundaries, the specifics, the requirements. If you're making, like, it doesn't matter if it's politics, cultures, environments, magical systems, everything needs to have its own specific set of rules. And it is so much fun to invent.
It is really fun. And it does seem complicated. You don't need an architect. You can make it simple. Star Wars had very simple rules, right? There were specific things the Force could do that we were told. We were shown. And then there were very specific ways that things flew, and they were based on our realistic understanding of physics. Now, Disney threw all that out the window over and over again. But that that building doesn't have to be a skyscraper in a new style. It can be a box. So long as the story can drive it and make it better, all you need is simple rules. I mean, there are very, very prolific fantasy writers that they come up with a set of rules and they use it for everything they ever write.
Yeah.
Now, I am kind of more on the architect side because I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what we did. We didn't just play the prefab stuff or even in the prefab worlds. We would take our favorite novels and create games out of them and change the rules to fit that. So we learned how to world build after spending years learning how to character build. That's what role playing and tabletop games does for the creative mind. It opens it up. I grew up in an era where Dungeons and Dragons was the equivalent of uh, Satan's Bible. Tom Hanks even made a movie about it called Mazes and Monsters, where he went crazy and thought everybody was an ogre trying to kill him, and he.
That is funny.
It's very funny and it is campy. It's
with
not
me,
bad.
I actually used to LARP with my brother. Because we would like to have our own little original characters within a Marvel universe or a DC universe. My brother is 6 years. This is the brother that's 6 years younger than me. Keep in mind, but we would literally live action role play our characters together, and it sometimes would be how I ended up creating new ideas for stories.
Well, I'm trying to convince my son. He has a character that he plays in Dungeons and Dragons. It is a wizard, and it's a crotchety wizard. And he has a really great backstory for him and everything. And he does the voice very well. In fact, he dressed up in basically Gandalf robes and the white hair and beard, but they were black, and bought a staff at the Renaissance Fair.
Whoa.
So he likes to dress up and do it. I'm like, you're going to have to let me write this story and help you write this story, and you got to voice him. So we're working on that. I'm still trying to convince him.
That's awesome. I've been told that I should get into Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd be more than happy to. I just know I'd get too addicted to it. So I don't.
You would, and it would take up your entire life. It's like a video game.
Yeah, I already have plenty of that I'm addicted to.
He goes, he plays every Sunday. At one point, I was going with him, and we were playing 3 nights a week.
Wow. Yeah. And see, I could never. I know me. I know myself well enough to know that if I entered a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, I would never return to reality, and I would never get anything done that needed to get done. I have a hard enough time with video games as is.
Yeah. So here's what I think that would fix it in a line.
Thinks you can shave a bone down to the size of a lockpick in just a day? Nah, lassie, it takes work. Lots and lots of work. Is that a good way to say it, lassie?
Yeah, lass.
Do you think I've been doing these last few months? Should I do that in the Scottish Irish accent that I can do?
Yeah. Well,
I think you can shave down a bone to the size of a lockpick overnight.
I might be able to do that voice when I voice it, but all my bad guys end up being British, so I'm a Star Wars. I'm a Texan, okay? It's very hard to do another accent and not have the Texas drawl come into it somewhere.
Are you kidding? Like I said, my mother was from South Africa, and every time I try a South African accent, for some reason, it always ends up Australian. I can never get it right. But I can do Scottish pretty well. Oh, hi, Zax.
Hey, Zax. Zach's channel is one of those channels that I did the advertisement for.
Ah, nice. Good choice.
And we'll be doing a few more. I'm going to get with Fandom Collective and get a few more that need some boosts. I don't know if I'm boosting anybody, but maybe if something takes off someday, they'll watch some of these older episodes. And,
Well, I'll also definitely suggest
and
to
I've
Matt.
been
I
I've
will
been tweeting out those advertisements so that they can download them and use them themselves.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk to Master about making you our next remedy of the week.
Hey, if that would be great.
I mean, this coming Sunday is Shavuot, so we're not going to have a psychosynopsis. But the week
Yeah, there
after
you
that,
go.
I will talk to him about it. I think he will agree with me,
Yeah.
especially after this fun stream.
Oh yeah, this is really fun.
I am really enjoying myself. So this is what Dungeons and Dragons is like, eh? Or at least part of it.
Wow. That's cool, Zach. So I'm glad.
Is this like the only a fraction of the D&D experience that I'm experiencing now?
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of us get into it. I'll do a voice. For example, one of the last campaigns we ran, I played a tabaxi, which is a cat creature, a humanoid cat. And I got thrown into the cellar to sleep because I marked the corner of the tavern when we walked into the inn. And I played it up like he was a goofy character that was a cat, right? But in the background, I would do things like I would get close to somebody I was interrogating like that, like a goofy cat, and then say something extremely soft but logical and like it was an act. Like you're going to tell us what you know because blah blah blah. And it turned out he was a member of an order, and that's what he did. But he was a cat, so I played him up as a cat, and I gave him an accent. He lisped a lot, and he would collect things like that had no importance. Like he had a stick, and he would trade his stick that was supposed to be a magical stick for like food and stuff. And people would think people would think it was so crazy that they would let him get away with it. And so everybody thought he was crazy, but he wasn't. He was a mastermind.
Gotcha.
So
that sounds pretty cat-like.
But you get into it because you do the voice. You're that character. It's like acting.
Yeah.
And you're doing it ad lib the whole time. And you're playing off one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that whole like character role play kind of thing.
Yeah.
With story writing is actually something I have done before, which is why I don't do Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm worried I'm going to get addicted to it again.
Yeah.
Because I literally I mean addicted. Like the last time I did character creation role plays, when I had to stop, I actually had withdrawal.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was bad. But that is actually now one of the stories that I've been working on.
There you go. And like I said, that Circles Ribbon is the first book, and actually it's a 6-book series. So it is them getting together and finding out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then them getting ready for a war, and then them resolving the conflict on the world above. Well, the second series, it happens a generation later, and their children and descendants have to go to the world below and fix it, but it's a steampunk world.
Cool. Yeah,
I go from fantasy to steampunk.
Nice. With mine, it's the story that I mentioned that was originally a character creation role play is pinned in my Twitter profile. That's that one. It's the co-authored one, yeah. He had his character, I had my character. We went back and forth in the comments, each writing a different our character's point of view of what was going on for as much as the comment space would allow.
Yeah.
And it was really, I won't lie, it was super addictive. I really did get properly addicted to it. But after I left, and then after a while, I reached out to him again and said, "Hey, I want to turn our role plays into a book. What are your thoughts?" And he said, "Sure, go ahead." And then after a while, he even ended up saying, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to join you on this." And then he became my co-author. So at first, I just got his permission to write the story, and then he ended up writing it with me. And the end result is pretty good, I would say. I mean, I'm a little biased because I did write half of it, but yeah, no, that was a really good experience, to be honest. Am I just supposed to believe you? Oh, I was gonna go with scoffed.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good. All right, so here we go. This is what'll fix that. So it's a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she can either choose to stay and remain a prisoner, or she can escape with the one chance she has of one chance she currently has of escaping. Always gotta put those choices in there. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Oh, yeah. Is that a cliche line? And again, what isn't a cliche these days? Ooh, suspense. What box? Why is can only she open it? Oh, I like it. Got a mystery going there.
Trying to stay in dialect.
Mm-hmm. Ah, there's another layer of mystery there. Who is this client? Do you want to go with hearty instead of full-bellied?
Yep. All right, so I know this one's bad. All right.
I was thinking hearty as in heart with a Y. Because that can sometimes mean
I don't think that it'll recognize it, but that's okay.
No, you just have to add an E before the A.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've I've used that adjective a couple of times when describing laughter.
Yeah.
So that's a good one to use.
So this is what we're doing in this whole section, their whole relationship. What we're doing is trying to explain why they have to do this together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Definitely
So
a good way to get into a story. I like
there
it.
are obviously still holes in it.
Mm-hmm. But those can be, but those can be filled in as the story goes on.
Right. And so what you do is you just try to get the story down in this thing. Yes, Zach, this is a story. So just to recap, because it has been 2.5 hours, and we may have to continue this again at a later date.
Yeah, perhaps. It is. I know it's getting late by you. It's only starting to get late over here. Yeah. But so I am having so much fun.
I know it's great, isn't it? And it shows you can literally sit down and write a short story that is a full good tale.
And it is good practice for me, because whenever I try to write just a regular old short story on the fly, like for a contest or something, I always think too hard. Yeah. That's my problem with everything, is I overthink.
That's the great thing about having the process of draft, rough draft, first draft, second draft, and final edit and polish.
Drafts.
So, yeah, because you can get your story down while it's fresh. While it's rolling, you can keep going. This is going to be a little herky-jerky until I go back and edit it, because what I'll do when I edit it is I'll read through it over and over again, and then I'll rewrite it.
Yeah.
And I'll add a little bit more detail. I'll add a little bit more inner thought, things like that.
Definitely.
So we'll, I mean, if you want to do this again here in the next week or two, I'd be more than happy to. But I think we have a really great start. So let's just go over what we've got so far.
Sure. It is good what we've got so far. I will say that.
Right, so the character is a dark elf female. Her name is Obsidian Alcora. She goes by Sid. The antagonist is also the secondary character for much of the story. Grudge Soulforge, a dwarf, but he's actually a warlock who's actually a black dragon named Artifacts. Okay? The goals is what the antagonist wants. He wants an artifact, and she's the bloodline needed for something. And we've decided that is...
a box.
Opening a box. Now, we don't have any description of the box yet. We'll get into that when we...
It can be as simple as Pandora's box, which is actually a Pythos, or it can be something entirely different. We haven't decided yet.
So we decided...
always figure that out later.
This was the situation. And then she has to get out. We decided also that this character had knowledge of her situation, at least why it would come to pass, and that she had experience.
Yes.
That's important, because it would be a totally different story if she hadn't.
If she was completely innocent and had no idea of...
It would be a more fear-based story, right?
Definitely. But no, this is more of a it sounded better for this to be a more calculating character, someone who wouldn't just be all fear, wouldn't just be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Yeah. Because that's not as entertaining as someone who already knows how to stay calm in this situation.
Yeah, a mystery box, just not the bad kind. Like that.
Yeah. I like those acts. I'm not sure if I've ever done those, but I can agree that it's not.
I don't even understand the concept. I don't understand not having a goal.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things. That's one of the things that we had here was that it's a goal.
One of the most important things for the antagonist and the protagonist is that they have to want something. That's one of the first things I learned. You gotta want. The character needs a goal. They have to have something that they're aiming for.
And so here's what we ended up with. And some of these things I highlight as I write, because I edit all the way up until I'm reading it for like when I do my videos, I have a little, I'm going to turn on my camera for a second.
Sure.
I have this. It's a Sony, cost me about $70. It's just a digital, I think it's got 4 gigabytes of memory on it, but you can get an SD card. and it's very, very sensitive. So right now, you can notice it's pretty echoey in this room. I go and I sit in my truck and I record it, and because that way nobody interrupts me, nobody can open the door, nobody can walk through. The dogs aren't eating like they are now, and
Hi, puppies.
and they're beagles, so they can get
Aw.
pretty rambunctious. But
We just have a screechy cockatiel.
yeah, well, those can get annoying too. I grew up. I had one when I was
Yes,
little.
he screeches like a petulant toddler or a Twitter SJW.
But
We love him to pieces, but he is a menace.
yeah, they saved my life. They're doing good.
Yeah.
They're good boys.
My
But
husband
anyway.
actually had our bird before we were even married.
Yeah.
My husband is, let's see, they got him in, I think, 2002 or 2004. So the bird is about 20 years old now. And we
live
took
a
him.
long time.
Yeah, we took him with us when we got married. So he lives with us now. Wahaha.
Yep. So let's go ahead and read through this.
Yes, I agree.
She woke to the sound of scuffling rats, involuntarily pulling her legs close. She drowsed awake to the stench of unwashed bodies, mildew, and decay. The rattle of chains, however, is what brought her fully aware. The slight burn told the older dark elf woman, and that we'll flesh that out instead of just one little crappy description, telling, not showing, that she had been taken, and they'd bound her with cold iron. This is not the first time Obsidian had found herself in such a situation. It was the first time she'd been taken unaware. Though the fear was there, she knew from long experience that panic was the last thing that would help. Focus, Sid, she told herself as she listened to the sounds around her. Among those sounds came hints of others, other prisoners, or at least one. Who's there? Sid asked out in the darkness with a hoarse whisper. A grunt came back, but the sound struck her as if the one who'd voiced it did not really care. Save your breath, a gravelly voice responded. Now, I just had a thought that while we're talking about sounds, maybe not quite there, but that hints at the lockpick. So you can relate subconsciously that she's accepting that he's made this lockpick because she's been hearing him doing it.
Gotcha. Okay, that is good.
So you got to think about the background too.
Is there a full moon?
They're hound dogs.
And suddenly I think of Elvis.
Sorry.
It's okay.
One is a beagle and one is a harrier. So, and all a harrier is a bigger beagle. In between foxhound and beagle. I think the kids got home. But anyway, all right, here we go. There was the definite sound of something rubbing on the stone floor. Why? Where are we? Feckin' elf and a woman, the dwarf grunted. All this time and finally get some company and it's a feckin' elf. Shit, Sid sighed. Name's Obsidian Alcora, she said in the darkness. Well, fuck me, he found you, the voice replied. Who found what? Sid asked, but she already knew. Well, part of it anyway. You don't know? The voice chuckled. It came out like ground sand. Who? Me? I'm just an unlucky dwarf. Been down here a few months alone in the dark. Hang on just a second. They're bringing in groceries. I was supposed to be done way before this.
I see.
All right.
I guess we did get a little off topic a few times.
We did. Yeah, but that's part of the process, right?
Yeah, it's part of the fun.
Yeah. Sid sighed. Not you. Who has us? Just her luck. Her only companion was a dwarf. Warlock. The statement was simple and short. Shit, she sighed. How do you get fed? Another gravelly chuckle came from the darkness. There's a hole right up above you. A loaf of bread comes down about once a week. Water comes out that little hole in the wall. You better do your best to catch that bread. If it's out of reach, you've got to wait another week.
That lets the readers know that the rats might end up eating it.
Right. And that would explain the rats.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, was all she could say. No chink in that armor. No guards to fall asleep or catch off their game, the voice said. But I think I can help us both. How do you think you can help me? You're in the same situation, Sid said. Fucking dwarf. Sid noted that she could reach the little hole that trickled water, but only just, getting only the slightest, almost brackish water into her mouth. Because I'm smart. The chuckle came again. I just finished this lockpick, see? Only just now? The skeptical elf asked. Elf thinks you can shave a bone down the size of a lockpick overnight. Now, on the edit, I'll probably explain whose bone it was.
Mm-hmm. Either another prisoner or a rat or even something else. Hell, if you want to be really gruesome, it can be one of his own.
Correct. The voice was disgusted. Les, what the hell else do you think I've been doing for these months? I'm just supposed to believe you. A thief? Sid scarfed. Hey, the dwarf said. Sound of chains rattled and hit the floor, the stone floor. You want to argue or come with me? Why would you help me? Sid asked. You have no reason to. There was a long silence. He wants you because you can open that damn box, I'm figuring. The voice was serious. I have an interest in that, not opening, on the count that my client wants to open it himself. Who's your client? Sid asked, disgusted that she didn't know enough. The dwarf's laugh was a hearty one this time. I don't ask, I don't look, I just do the job and drop it off. Now, I'm probably going to put something in there like, how do you just assume I'm an elf? Or
how do you just assume I'm a dwarf?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, I imagine there would be like either different voice patterns, like maybe even accents from their separate cultures.
Right.
That can let them know. Because elves and dwarves generally have different languages, but if they all have a common speech that humans generally speak, because humans always dominate the planets, then they would be able. Then they would use that to communicate, or they'd understand each other's languages, thereby recognizing each other by their accent/language.
Correct.
Which I think is the simplest answer.
Yep. So, yeah, we'll get into that and then talk about who Artifacts is as they're trying to escape. Mm-hmm. Send them through simple traps, things like that. But we can work on that next time if we do this again.
I am more than happy to do this again.
Okay, just let me know your schedule. Mm-hmm. I'm usually off on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays.
I usually have my most availability on Sundays, depending, because holidays get in the way sometimes.
Sunday night's not bad because it's a very slow night at work. I'm just basically on most nights watching servers, making sure they're not shutting down.
Gotcha. Because I know my husband and I have some plans to do our own streaming shows.
So probably what we'll do is next Monday I'm going to do another 4 chapters on the story stream, and then when you guys come back, if you can do that on Sunday evening, then I can do that too.
Quite possibly. I know this coming Sunday and Monday, like I said, is a religious holiday in which I cannot do a thing except eat, sleep, read, repeat for 72 hours.
Right.
Pray for us.
Right.
But yeah, I am. But yeah, I will let you know when I have availability, and I am. And just send me a link if you want me to come on again, because I really did enjoy this.
Absolutely, I did
awesome.
Too. Isn't it? It's a great idea. Zach said it. It was a great idea for a show.
Oh yeah.
It shows people that they can do this. It's not anything.
Writing is hard. We just make it look easy.
Right. Well, I guess so.
I mean, that's how I tell my parents about it. Writing is hard. I make it look easy. Like my grandfather is like, so what I tell one of my grandfather when I've sent him my essays and he asks me to send them again in English because my wording is too complicated for him.
Well, we have cats too, but they live together I've caught them sleeping in the same bed, cuddled up together.
Aww.
But Now, granted that we do have a Maine Coon, so he's
Uh,
like a dog. He even wears a harness and everything.
Some
And
parents
he's
tried to get their Maine Coon to wear a leash. It
yeah.
ended up running back into the house as soon as it was outside.
Well, he loves it outside. He climbs the trees and everything.
Hmm.
But we live out at the lake. We have a lot of property, so
Yeah. You have the space to let him run around.
yeah. So
My
that's why we
parents
have
did
hound
not.
dogs. And normally I have my gun up here, but I don't like showing it on YouTube.
No, that's
So,
fair. YouTube doesn't like that stuff after
yeah.
all.
So,
Unless you're specifically one of those channels, but whatever. Anyway.
well, we have wild animals out here, so
Oh, that's fair.
yeah, it's mostly about that. I mean, I believe in the Second Amendment, but we have a lot of animals, a lot of wild pigs and things that'll. Raccoons are not.
Yeah.
Friendly,
Do you end up
so.
cooking those wild pigs?
Sometimes.
That's
Sometimes they're not
actually
so good, but sometimes we do.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone who joined us. I had a really good time, and
Me
I'm
too.
so glad we did this.
Me as
So,
well.
I'm going to leave it up, so we'll share it out, and hopefully we'll inspire some folks to give writing a try.
Mm-hmm. Just don't quit as soon as you start, otherwise you'll never finish.
There you go.
Thank you for having me on, sir.
Yeah, and my tagline, your life is your story. Make it a great one. So good night, everyone.
Good night.